People think mirrors are harmless, just glass and reflection, but after what I saw, I've covered every mirror in my apartment with sheets. I haven't looked at my own reflection in months. It started after my mother passed away. I inherited her apartment, an old creaky place downtown that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She'd been obsessed with antiques, and her bedroom was filled with them. But the one thing that always stood out was the mirror. It wasn't just any mirror. It was huge, framed with dark wood carved into twisting shapes. She told me once it had been in our family for generations, passed down from her grandmother. Never move it, she used to say, and never look into it after midnight. I thought she was being dramatic. The first week I stayed there, I ignored her warning. Every night I walked past it on the way to bed. It always gave me chills, though I couldn't explain why. My reflection seemed slower somehow, like it wasn't perfectly in sync. Then one night, around 12:30, I went to get some water. I walked past the mirror and saw something that made me stop. My reflection blinked a moment after I did. I froze, staring at it. I even waved my hand, moved my head side to side. The reflection followed, but there was a tiny delay, like the glass itself was lagging. I leaned closer, squinting. That's when I saw the smile. I wasn't smiling, but my reflection was. I stumbled back so fast I knocked over a lamp. The sound startled me enough to look away. When I looked back, everything was normal again. The next day, I told myself it was exhaustion, grief, lack of sleep. But that night at exactly 12:03, I heard tapping, soft, rhythmic. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the mirror. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I turned on every light in the room, walked up to it and said out loud, "This isn't funny." The tapping stopped, but just before I turned away, I saw something move in the reflection, behind me, a shadow passing across the hallway, though I knew every light in the apartment was on. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I covered the mirror with a blanket, but even then I could hear faint scratching behind the fabric. That evening my friend Marla came over. I told her what had been happening. She laughed, thinking I was joking, and yanked the sheet off the mirror. "See, it's fine." Before I could stop her, she leaned close to the glass and said, "Hello? Anybody home?" Her reflection smiled back, only it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too deliberate. Marla stepped back. "Okay, that's creepy. Did you see that?" I nodded. She turned to face me, and that's when her reflection didn't. It just stood there in the mirror, facing forward, still smiling. Marla didn't notice. She picked up her purse and said she had to go. I walked her to the door. When I came back to the bedroom, her reflection was still there, standing in the mirror even though she'd left. That was the moment I realized whatever was inside that glass wasn't tea showing me my world. It was showing me its. I called an antique dealer the next morning, told him I wanted to sell the mirror. He came by, took one look and went pale. He asked where I'd gotten it. I said it was my mother's. He muttered something about a mourning glass, an old superstition where families used mirrors to trap the souls of the dead. He said once a mirror's been fed, it can't be destroyed, only contained. He refused to take it. That night I tried to cover it again, but the blanket kept sliding off. I taped it down. Still, at 12:03 I woke to the sound of tapping. This time it was louder, closer, like someone knocking from inside the glass. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The tapping stopped. Then, from the hallway, I heard my mother's voice. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "come look at me." I froze. The voice was coming from the bedroom, the mirror's direction. I whispered, "Mom?" The voice was calm, warm, exactly as I remembered. "I've missed you, just come here, let me see you." I wanted to believe it was her. I almost did. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You look so much like me now." That was what the woman in the mirror had whispered in my nightmare the night before. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam caught the mirror's surface, and I saw her. My mother, pale and smiling, standing behind my reflection. Her eyes were all wrong, black, glassy, and wide. She raised her hand slowly and pressed it against the inside of the glass. I backed away, but my reflection didn't move. It just smiled wider. Then it reached out. The mirror cracked right down the middle, a sound like splitting bone. My reflection's hand pushed through, skin tearing, glass bending, and I screamed. I ran from the apartment, didn't stop until I reached the street. When I returned the next day with a locksmith, the mirror was gone. There was nothing on the wall but faint scratches shaped like fingers. Marla never returned my calls. A week later, her sister told me she hadn't been the same since that night. She'd started talking to her reflection, and one morning she was just gone. They found her apartment empty, but every mirror in her house was shattered from the inside. Now, even when I pass a store window or catch my reflection in a car mirror, I look away fast. Because sometimes I see her standing there, smiling, waiting, and every time I blink, she moves a little closer. I've worked as a night nurse for nearly 10 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Cardiac arrests, trauma victims, people taking their last breaths while I held their hands. But nothing prepared me for what happened in room 313. I transferred to St. Helena's Hospital about 6 months ago. It was an old building, long hallways that smelled faintly of bleach and something older, something sour. The kind of smell that sinks into the walls. The hospital used to be a psychiatric ward before it was converted, and even though the staff never talked about it, you could feel the history pressing down on you. The night shift was always quiet, too quiet sometimes. I liked it that way, down till my second week, when I was assigned to the 3rd floor. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I noticed something strange on the patient list. Room 313 was marked as occupied, but I hadn't received any new admission. The system said the patient's name was Marjorie Wills, age 78. I didn't remember checking her in. I asked the other nurse on duty, Clara, if she knew anything. "Marjorie," she repeated, frowning. "No, that room's been empty for years." I showed her the monitor. Sure enough, there it was. Room 313, patient admitted at 2:12 a.m. Clara's face went pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. "They sealed that room after the fire." I stared at her. "What fire?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "It was before you started here. A patient set her bedding on fire. She was old, confused, couldn't move fast enough. They say she burned alive before anyone could reach her." I swallowed hard. "And her name?" Clara looked away. "Marjorie Wills." I laughed nervously. "You're messing with me." She didn't answer. I decided to check for myself. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the dim hallway toward room 313. The lights above flickered every few seconds. I tried to ignore the way my footsteps echoed, how the air seemed to grow colder the closer I got. When I reached the door, I saw the old burn marks around the frame. The number plate was half melted, but the door, it wasn't sealed, it was open. Inside, the room looked normal at first. A bed, a monitor, a nightstand. But everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, like it hadn't been touched in years. I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting across the wall. That's when I saw her. A woman lying in the bed, thin as paper, her face half hidden by the shadows. Her skin was pale, stretched tight over her bones. The heart monitor beside her was off, but a faint beeping echoed somewhere in the room, slow and steady. I froze. "Mrs. Wills," I whispered. Her head turned slowly toward me. Her eyes opened, cloudy, milky white, and her mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "You came back," she rasped. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Ma'am, you're not supposed to be here. This room—" She interrupted me. "You hear it too, don't you, the crying?" "What?" She pointed to the corner of the room. "They never stopped crying." I turned my flashlight toward where she pointed. The corner was empty, except for a dark stain on the floor that looked suspiciously like ash. When I turned back to her, the bed was empty. The sheets were perfectly smooth, untouched, as if no one had been there at all. I ran. I don't even remember how I got back to the nurse's station, but when I did, Clara said I was white as a sheet. I told her what I saw, but she refused to believe me. She said room 313 was locked, always had been. I dragged her down the hall to show her. When we got there, the door was shut tight, sealed with a metal latch and a padlock. Clara crossed her arms. "You're overworked, that's all. Go sit down." But when I looked at the monitor again later that night, room 313 still showed a patient. Marjorie Wills, stable condition. Heart rate 62 BPM. Every night after that, the system updated itself at exactly 2:12 a.m. The same name, the same vitals. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps down that hall when no one else was around, the faint creak of a door opening. Once I swore I heard someone whisper my name. 3 weeks later, we had a new nurse join the night shift, a guy named Ben. He was confident, a bit arrogant. I told him about room 313, warned him not to go near it. He laughed, said I was trying to scare him. That night at 2:12 a.m. the monitors flickered. Room 313 lit up again, patient admitted. By 3 a.m. Ben was gone. We found his flashlight lying in front of 313, the door slightly open. Inside, nothing. No Ben, no Marjorie, just the same burnt walls, the same faint smell of smoke. Security footage from that hour showed him walking toward the room, but the moment he crossed the threshold, the video glitched. When it came back, the hallway was empty. The hospital filed a report. They said Ben probably walked out and didn't come back, but I know that's not what happened. A week later, I went into the records office and looked up the old incident report from the fire. The description of Marjorie S. injuries made me sick. 3rd-degree burns over 90% of her body. The note at the bottom said, "Body not recovered." I quit St. Helena's last month. I couldn't take it anymore. The nightmares were too real. The beeping monitors, the smell of smoke, her voice whispering my name. But even now, every night around 2:12, I wake up. I swear I hear that same slow, steady beep. And sometimes I smell smoke. Would you go inside room 313 or leave the hospital forever? The first night I found the red phone, I thought it was a prank. Hospitals collect junk, old beds, machines, paperwork, but this thing was different. A rotary phone, bright red, tucked behind the nurse's station on the closed 5th floor. The cord wasn't plugged into anything. Still, every few hours it rang. I was the only nurse on that floor, covering night shift while the wing was being renovated. Around 2 a.m. it started again. One sharp ring, then another, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. I stared at it, half laughing, half creeped out. "You're not even connected," I said. It rang again. I picked it up. "Hello?" A woman's voice whispered, "Don't let him in." Then the line went dead. I hung up, checked the hall, no one. I convinced myself it was interference, maybe a maintenance worker using an intercom somewhere. But at 3 a.m. it rang again, same voice. "He's on your floor now." I slammed the receiver down. I told myself I wouldn't answer again. But when it rang a third time, I grabbed it out of reflex. The voice was softer this time, shaky. "You have to listen. Room 509, he's coming." I hesitated. The entire floor was supposed to be empty, but the lights over the 500 wing flickered like they'd just been turned on. I walked down the hall, the old tiles groaning under my shoes. Room 509's door was half open. Inside, the air was freezing, my breath visible. The hospital bed sat in the corner, restraints hanging loose. The monitor beside it blinked weakly, showing a faint pulse. Someone was lying there. The figure was small, frail, wrapped in sheets. For a second, I thought maybe a patient had been left behind, but when I stepped closer, I saw the tag on the wrist, "Patient, deceased." The heart monitor flatlined. The red phone rang again, its shrill sound echoing from down the hall. I picked it up with trembling hands. "He's there," the voice whispered. "Behind you." I spun around. The bed was empty. The door slammed shut, and the overhead light burst, showering glass across the floor. I hit the emergency call button on my pager, but the system was dead. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Coming from the hallway outside. A tall shape moved past the small window in the door. Too tall to be human, its shadow stretching unnaturally long. I backed into the corner, clutching the receiver. The woman's voice returned, frantic. "If he touches you, you'll take my place. Don't let him touch you." The door handle began to turn. I screamed, dropped the phone, and bolted for the bathroom inside the room, slamming the door behind me. I crouched by the sink, shaking, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside. The handle rattled once, twice. Then silence. After what felt like hours, I opened the door. The hallway was dark again. The phone lay on the floor where I'd dropped it, cord tangled. I ran straight to the stairwell and didn't stop until I hit the parking lot. The next morning I told my supervisor what happened. She gave me a strange look and said, "There isn't any phone on the 5th floor. They removed those years ago." We went upstairs together. The nurse's station was empty. No phone, no line, no dust ring where it might have sat. But on the counter, taped to the wall, was a small note written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for answering. I'm free now." They said I was tired, overworked, seeing things. But sometimes during the night shift, the intercom crackles for just a second, and I hear that same woman's voice whisper, "Don't let him in. Would you answer the phone, or let it keep ringing?"